So welcome back to the fourth session on JavaScript. And today we will continue learning more about document object model and how to do a bit more about DOM manipulation. Okay, now all of you are familiar with how to select the DOM, right? Using the query selector method. So now we will see how we can add contents to the DOM dynamically. Now, before I do that, let's take a small example just to recollect things out. So I'll go back to my application here and let's create a couple of elements here. So we know, right, how to create elements. So I'll give this element an ID of, say, root. Okay. I'll create a paragraph which has a class of content. Okay, I'm just creating some random data. Okay, and I'm creating a span with a class of, say, text. Okay, these are various kinds of elements that we can create. Also, let me open up the Google console window here so that we can log the value. Okay, so first thing I'll do in here is to clear the console window. Now, what I need to show you is this. Okay, we all know, right, how to select an element. So can anyone let me know how to select the div with an ID of root? Okay, what is the code that you will write? Okay, I would like to select the div with an ID of root, and I would like to select anything that has a class of content. So what is the typical code that you will write? Query selector, right? Perfect, yeah. Okay, so we all know that, right? Now, let me just show you here. I'll say console, or maybe I'll say const elements equal to document dot query selector all. Okay, and all we know, right? It can return more than multiple elements. So I'll simply say a class of content. Now we know at this point in time that two elements should be returned back to us, right? So if I do a console.log, we will see there are two node lists being returned, and both have the class of content attached to it. So as of now, it's simply two paragraphs, right? Maybe we also have one more div here. Okay, let me just correct this out. This should be paragraph. Okay, maybe I have one more div here that has a class of content. Okay, so at this point in time, we know that there should be three elements that is returned. And this is kind of clear from the output, right? There are two paragraphs and there is one div. Now there are a couple of more things that you can do with this query selector all. You can actually pass in multiple selectors. So maybe what if I actually need all the elements that has a class of content as well as that has a class of text. Okay, that has a class of. Okay, so will this work? This is what we are kind of thinking about, whether this code will work or not. Okay, so if I kind of take a look at the output, as of now, there are no syntax errors in here, right? But then I am also not able to see the element that has a class of text here. Okay, that is also kind of not visible, right? Let me simply go back to the documentation now. I'll type in mdn and I'll type in query selector all. Okay, and let's take a peek into this documentation. So always refer mdn if you have any kind of query about the API that you are using, right? And this is where you will get all the information about how to use the API. Okay, for example, here we have document.querySelector all, and that contains div with a class of note and div with a class of alert. Okay, so this example returns a list of all div elements within the document with the class of either note or alert. So this is kind of the syntax that we have to use. See, what I did here is I just wanted to show you that even though I actually gave it multiple elements like this, right, there was no syntax errors, but I didn't got the expected output. Okay, we just need to be aware of, because many times you may give in a command and you may not get any error, but you'll also not get the expected output. So the first thing you have to do is to take a look at the documentation about how you can pass in multiple elements. Okay, so once you are familiar with this syntax, now you can easily go back in here and simply correct this out, right? Something like this. So now it will actually give you four elements. Okay, three contains an element with a class of content, and one is a span that has a class of text. Okay, this is how you can select multiple elements using different selectors. Okay, so is this part clear to everyone so far? Just let me know in the chat window. Okay, this is kind of a quick revision apart from whatever we did with respect to query selector, right? Now I'm hoping that you already did your revision and you are familiar with the basic stuff. Also, you know how to attach the event listener. You also know about event bubbling, event capturing, and event delegation. So am I right to assume that now, everyone? Let me know in the chat window. Okay, okay. So let's now continue on this. Okay, and let me show you what we need to build here. Okay, and then we'll kind of build it together. So, okay, so this is what we are kind of building. Okay, so do not worry about the user interfaces and the CSS. Okay, we will cover those points at a later point in time. So we have a simple header here that currently contains two tasks, task 1 and task 2. Also in the later sessions, we will get this data from an API backend. Okay, right now we will hard code everything within the document just to understand the concepts. Now each of this task item, okay, it has two buttons, right? One is called add above and the one is called add below. Okay, now when I click on add above, I actually want a new task to be added above the current one. Okay, and when I click on add below, I actually want a new task to be added below this current one. Okay, similarly, if I click on add above on this task number 2, a new task should be added above the task 2. Okay, so just to show you an example, if I click on add above on the task 2, let me just click on this JavaScript. Okay, and there's an alert just for debugging. I'm adding a new task, the task 1.1. Okay, and when I click on OK, okay, this task should be added above the task that I clicked on, right? Which is task 2. Okay, maybe if I come back to the task 1.1 now and I'll say add below. Okay, and I'll add a new task called task 1.2. And this task will be added below the task 1.1. Okay, so if I come back in here and say add above here on the first task, okay, you will see a new task is added as a first element in this unordered list. Okay, task 0 is added. Now the good thing here is, even though you are adding this new task, right, those new tasks also has this event attached correctly. See, you can actually click on this button and you can keep on adding the task. So these things are dynamically created. Okay, and this is done through event delegation. Now, the moment I tell you event delegation, you all know I have attached the event to the parent element rather than to attach the element on each of these individual list items. So is the requirements clear to everyone? Just drop in a message in the chat window. Okay, so currently we are taking an input as a prompt. Okay, later on we will be creating forms, etc. Okay, so yeah, so let me just move this code away. Okay, and this is what we need to simulate. Now in here I'll create a new JS bin. Okay, and I'll click on this autorun JS so that our script is automatically executed. Okay, I'll add this header 3, which is DOM manipulation, and you can see the results on the right side here. Okay, I'll put some CSS here. Okay, so do not worry about the CSS. I'm just keeping it at least to have some basic styling in my application. So you can ignore this. Later on, we will talk about CSS. Okay, and once I have this information in here, okay, I'll create an unordered list with an ID of task. Okay, so this is kind of a list, and I'll bootstrap some data into this. Okay, I'll bootstrap some hard-coded data into this. Okay, so this is how a task item looks like. Okay, so every task item is represented by a list li, okay, which has a class of task item and also a respective ID. Okay, it has this text and it has two buttons. Okay, and these buttons have this data action, which is called add above and add below. And this is a custom data attribute that we are creating. Okay, you can name it anything. Okay, I simply choose to call it as data action. Okay, so is this markup clear to everyone? Let me know in the chat window. Any queries, please, if there are any queries, please ask right now. Okay, so this data action is custom attributes that we are adding. The browser doesn't know anything about the data action attribute. Okay, it's up to us, the programmer, about how we want to use this data action. Now, the reason I kept data action here is I'll simply attach an event on this UL. Okay, and I'll simply check whether the button on which the click happened has the data action add above or add below. And if it is add above, I'll add the content above the current item. And if the button that is clicked is add below, I'll add the content below the current item. Okay, there are various ways to do it. I could have kept a class also here, right? But typically I will not use classes to attach behaviors. Okay, because classes are primarily kept for styling the user interfaces. Okay, So now this is the basic part that we have. Now what I need to do is this. We have to implement this feature. So when I click on this add above or the add below, a prompt has to be displayed, and whatever task I enter, that has to be added either above the current task or below the current task. Okay, that is my requirement. Okay, and to achieve this requirement, we will use an important method that is available as part of the node elements, and that method is known as insert adjacent HTML. Insert adjacent HTML. So this is the method we'll be using. Okay, and this takes in two parameters. Okay, the first parameter is the position where you want to insert. Okay, so the first parameter is the position, and the second parameter will be the actual HTML that you want to insert. Okay, and the positions can be one of this value. So it can be before begin, it can be after begin, it can be before end, or it can be after end. Okay, so this is my API, insert adjacent HTML. Okay, that takes in two parameter. One is the position and one is the actual content. This is string. Okay, this will be string output. We have to build the HTML. That means we have to build this li, this data, and these buttons manually. Okay, we'll see the usage of this API. Okay, but is this API clear to everyone so far? This insert adjacent HTML take two parameters. One is the position, other is the HTML to be inserted. Okay, let me know in the chat window. Okay, okay. Now to understand this API further, let me show you what do we mean by these parameters: before begin, after begin, before end, after end. Okay. Now assume that say we have a paragraph tag here. Okay, I'm just taking a paragraph tag. Okay, just to demonstrate it. Okay, so we have a paragraph tag. Okay, that has some content. Okay, and we have this paragraph tag ending here. Okay, now within this context of paragraph tag, if I am using this insert adjacent HTML, and if I pass in the parameter as before begin, that data will be added here just above the opening paragraph tag. So before begin will be added here. And if I use the parameter as after begin, that content will be added here. If I use the parameter as before end, that means before the end of this tag, it will be added here. And if I use the parameter as after end, that content will be added after the closing paragraph tag. Okay, whatever content we are adding, that content will be added at these respective positions. Okay, within the context of this div or paragraph that we have here. So is this clear how this API will work and where these parameters will go when you say before begin, after begin, before end, and after end? So whatever content you have, that will be added at these specific positions. Okay, let me know in the chat window. Is this explanation clear? Okay. Okay, now let's see. Let's make it work now. Okay, so I'll minimize this. Okay, I'll go back to my code. Now, first thing I'll do is, as I said, right, we don't know how many tasks we will be adding, right? We can add one task, we can add two tasks, we can add hundreds of tasks. And I don't want that all these add events to be attached to hundreds of tasks, correct? So I'll be using event delegation here. We'll be using event delegation. That means I'll be adding the task to the parent element. Let me get the parent container here, which is document.query selector a UL with a ID of task. So this will give me the unordered list. Okay, UL. So this will be this parameter here. I hope this is clear to everyone, right? So this will get me this respective elements. Okay, then what I'll do here is I will come back here and say task container dot add event listener. Okay, and the event that we are interested in is the click event. Okay, and this is my callback function, right? When the event happens, this method will be called. Okay, so as of now, if I simply do an alert here without any parameter, I know that if I click on this button, an alert should come up. Okay, if I click on this button, an alert should come up. Okay, so I think this code is very, very clear, right? There won't be any doubt so far, I suppose. Okay, so now here the thing is, since I am attaching this event to the task container, if I click on this task also, right, this alert will come. So we know that, right? Because we are using event delegation. That means we have to do a filter and we have to check whether the target is the button element on which the click happens. Okay, so otherwise anywhere within this container, if you click, we get the alert. So that's kind of a very quick test. I could simply do if e.target dot tag name is equal to say button. Okay, then only we are now interested in, right? So if I do an alert now, so now at this point in time, if I try to click on this task, nothing will happen. Okay, because the target name is not matching the button, right? But if I click on this add above or add below, the alert should display. So is this thing clear to everyone so far? Okay. So now there are a couple of things that we want to do. Okay. One thing is the moment I click on this button, the first thing I need to know whether I have clicked on the add above button or on the add below button, right? Because accordingly we have to add the data. Okay, that's kind of the first thing we have to do. Okay. So for that, what I'll be doing here is, okay, I'll be simply storing the target into a variable. Okay, so that I don't have to write every time e dot target, right? I'll simply refer it to as target. Okay, and then I can grab the action using target dot get attribute, and the attribute I am interested in is data action, right? So at this point in time, if I click on alert and pass in the action variable, I'll either get add above or add below as the parameter. Okay, let's try it out. I'm clicking on add above and you get the text add above. Okay, and I am clicking on add below and you are getting the text add below. Okay, so once this is done, I also need this ID, okay, on which the click happened. Okay, maybe later on I may do something with the ID. Okay, just to show you how can I get that, I'll simply come back here and say const ID equal to target dot. See, now the thing here is I am clicking on the button, right? But the ID is not on the button. The ID is on the parent element, right? Do everyone agree with this? Okay, ID is not on the button, ID is on the parent element. So I will say target dot parent node dot get attribute ID. Okay, this will get me the correct ID. Okay, so at this point in time, I'll simply do an alert of say action and the ID. Okay, so here I am using the ES6 template string. Okay, the template string begins with a backtick. This is a backtick. Okay, and within this template string, we can have hard-coded value as well as dynamic variables as well. Okay, just a note. Okay, we'll talk about this at a later point in time. Okay, now at this point in time, if I click on add above, you get action task 1. Okay, and if I click on add below, you get the message action task 1. Okay, now I don't want action here. I actually want this action to be substituted, right? So I'll say dollar and the value of the action now. Okay, now at this point in time, you will get add above task 1 and you will get add below task 1. Okay, so we have all the parameters available. Okay, and I'll simply comment this code out because this is no longer needed. Now at this point in time, we have to create a new task and insert it either above the current task or below the current task. Okay, that's our requirement, right? So for that, what I'll do, I'll write a method called insert task. Okay, and I'll pass in the action parameter. I'll pass in the ID. Okay, as well as I'll pass in the parent as well. Okay, so I'll say target dot parent node. Okay, so I'll write a custom function that takes in these 3 parameters. Okay, because see, when you insert a task, right, first is we have to prompt for the task information, and then we have to build this HTML manually, and then we have to insert this HTML into the DOM. Okay, so now let's come back here and write our method for inserting a new task. Okay, so I'm just putting a small comment here. Okay, and I'll create a new function called insert task. Okay, that has the action parameter. This is just a parameter. Name doesn't matter, whatever name. I'm giving it a meaningful name. Taking it the ID as well as the parent as well. Okay, so this is the signature, right? This signature should match. So is it clear so far? Everyone with me at this point in time? Okay, yeah. Okay. So later on, we'll convert this into a component. Okay, reusable component. So right now, we'll keep it very simple so that every line of code we are able to understand. Okay, so now the first thing I do here is I'll get in a new task. Okay, and for now I'll use in a built-in method called prompt. So this prompt will bring up a dialog, okay, in which you can enter some data. Okay, and I'll simply label it as enter task. And once you enter this data, right, that data will be stored into a variable called new task. This is built in. This is part of the window object. Okay, so even if you omit the window, it will still work. Okay, now the thing is, once you enter the new task, you actually have to build this entire li, right? So that even the new task that is added gets these buttons as well, right? Now again, as a better practice, we will organize the code, right? So here I'll say let task UI equal to build new task UI. Okay, and I'll pass in the new task as the parameter. Okay, I am again using a helper method that we will shortly write so that we get this required data built up. Okay, so before continuing, so let's build this function. Build single task item UI, right? So function build new task UI, and it takes the new task as a parameter. Okay, it takes new task as a parameter. Now remember one thing, functions are the building blocks of JavaScript applications. Okay, so we'll talk more about functions. So far, the only thing you need to know is this is how you create a function in JavaScript. Function has a name, and it can take in a parameters, and it can return some value. Okay, if a function doesn't return anything, by default, it will be undefined. Okay, just keep that point in mind. So now what we have to do here is, once we have this information, right? So here we have to, first I'll check whether this new task is not empty, right? If it is empty, we don't have to do anything. So I'll simply return from here. Okay. Okay, then let's create these IDs also, right? Because every task should have an ID. Now in real projects, right, these IDs will be generated in the backend server. Okay, so for now, we'll create some temporary IDs. Okay, and how can I create it? I simply say const ID equal to document.query selector all. I'm just selecting all the task item. Okay, getting the length and simply incrementing it by 1. Okay, so this is just a quick way to create ID for now. Okay, so if I do an alert here, I'll get the ID, right? So just to show you, I'll come back here, click on add above. Okay, you get this dialog. I'll enter the task, click on OK, and you get this new ID created. So far, everyone with me? Okay, now is the time we have to create the HTML. Okay, see this HTML has to be dynamically created, right? So now what I can do here is, so I'll create a variable called say HTML. Okay, and I'll use backtick again. Okay, I'll use backtick again. And this is where we will be creating the HTML. Okay, and whatever HTML is created, we will simply return it from the function. We'll return it from the function. So that means this build new task UI function takes in a task as a parameter and returns a task HTML UI. Okay, this is the meaning of this specific function declaration. Now what will go here, right, within this HTML? So actually this entire li, this thing should go, right? I'll simply copy and I'll paste it here. So this is what one task item will look like. Okay, this is what one task item will look like. Now the only difference here is instead of this hard-coded values, this value should be dynamic, correct? So for example, here instead of task-1, it should be replaced by the ID. Okay, instead of the hard-coded task1 here, this should be replaced by the new task variable. Okay, and this should actually suffice our requirement, right? Because every task has this li along with the task description and the 2 buttons that is needed to insert the task, right? So once this information is available, so when you call insert task, okay, the task is captured, the user interface is created, and that value is available within the task UI variable, right? This is where the HTML is about. So if I'll come back here and say alert task UI, let's see what this variable contains, right? So I'll come back here and say add below and add the task as task3. And let's click on OK here. And this is the HTML that we just created. See, it has the ID. Okay, it has the description. It has the buttons also. Okay, now what we have to do is according to whether this add above or add below button is clicked, right? We have to use the insert adjacent HTML method and insert this record at the appropriate location. That is what we need to do. So let's click here. Okay, go back to the code here. Okay, I'll comment out this alert now. And here I'll simply say, first thing is if okay, the task UI is null, right? Nothing is developed. We'll simply return because we don't want to build the HTML. Okay, because here we are doing a check, right? If there is no text entered, we are simply returning, right? That means undefined is written from here. Okay, so we don't have to do anything here. Then we will say if the action is equal to add above. This is one if condition. Okay, next condition will be else if action equal to add below. These are the 2 conditions we would like to handle. Okay, because we are either adding above the current item or we are adding below the current item, right? So here we'll simply come back in here and say, we already have the parent element. We'll say parent dot insert adjacent HTML before begin. Okay, and we'll pass in the task UI. We all know, right, why before begin from the diagram that we draw. Before begin, we'll simply add it before that current item. Okay, and if it is in the add below section, we'll simply say parent dot insert adjacent HTML after end. Okay, and we'll pass in the task UI as the parameter. Okay, so at this point in time, once we do this code, okay, we can do a very quick check here. Now I'll say add above. I'm saying task 0. Okay, and click on above. So this task 0 should be added above task 1. Okay, and you can see the output here. Okay, and on this task 0, I'll say add below. Okay, and I'll write in a new task 0.1. And this task will be added below task 0. See, our application is working correctly. Okay, now you can add the task here. Task 3, whatever you want, right? And things will correctly work out. So is this very, very clear to everyone how these things are working? Okay, and this method is very, very important to be aware of. Okay, later on this will help you out for building complex applications, or you are doing drag and drop operations, right? All those times this APIs will be very, very useful to us. Is it clear, everyone? The usage? Okay.